Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Lincoln, for a great talk. Just a disclaimer here, we're not sponsors. We don't sponsor any event. I don't get paid for this. Actually, the reason I'm here is that we care, and I personally care, about the Israeli startup ecosystem and the tech ecosystem in general. What we often see is the Israeli companies, they have this great technology, often a good product, but the things that are kind of lacking versus the US competitor would be customer success, sales and marketing, and other things which over time we're seeing these other functions strengthening here in Israel, and I think this thing is great. So with that, I'm going to jump to the presentation. So I want to talk about the growing importance of customer success for startups. I have only 20 minutes, so unfortunately I'm going to be brief with some of these slides. I'm going to stay here afterwards, at least for the lunch, so feel free to grab me afterwards if you have any questions. A bit about me, I'm going to be very quick here. Involved in multiple startups, from SaaS to cybersecurity to autonomous vehicles, open source software, very broad. One company I want to mention here is Zoomin, which is touches more customer success. Basically, they take all your technical documentation and allow your customers to reach it in any touch point that they have. So that could be your documentation portal, it can be within the service cloud, it could be within the community, it could be even within the product. And the idea is for the customers to be able to touch all your technical content in one coherent, more up-to-date way, simpler. A bit about Bessemer, for those of you who don't know us. We're a large VC fund, one of the largest in the world. We now operate out of our 10th fund. It's a $1.8 billion fund. 16 partners across the globe between the US, Israel, and India, all one global partnership. Probably the most active investor in terms of cloud computing, SaaS companies. These are some of our companies over time. As you see, it keeps growing. A few to mention here are the Israeli ones, Wix and Fiverr and Cloudinary. In the US, one that's worth mentioning is Gainsight, that I assume many of you know or are using. We're going to skip for this one. We start investing typically very early. We grow with our companies over time. So what you see here is the revenue when we started investing, and then the revenue through the next few years. And in Israel, we're a small partnership here. We're 2 people, but one of the most active investors in Israel. We invest across all stages, from early stage up to growth rounds in multiple areas. So let's talk about the rise of customer success. And I want to touch more from a board perspective, from an investor standpoint, and how we've seen it change and evolve over time. So 7 years ago, even when we invested in Gainsight, most of the companies would kind of separate 2 different distinct kind of stages. One would be the pre-sale, which is where you market, you find customer, you sell to them, and then it was the post-sale, which would be the service and support. You had companies or tools that you use like Eloqua or Salesforce or Zendesk for each one of them. These would be kind of 2 separate things that most companies would think about. And what we see now is that kind of with that move from transactional to subscription and ongoing relationship that Lincoln talked a lot about, this kind of stages have evolved. And we start with land a customer, and that's kind of acquiring a customer, getting them to use their product for the first time. And obviously there's still the service and support, but now it's more of a continuum. And there's a lot of things in between, which is getting them to adopt your product, getting them to expand, getting them to renew. And that's kind of the role of customer success. So, and it's not just the perpetual software moving to subscription software, like SAP to Workday, and I assume most of you, or I at least hope that many of you, are working with subscription-based companies. But it's also hardware moving to consumption-based pricing. So Dell, if you used to buy a server or used to buy storage, now people are using AWS and using and paying based on consumption. We're seeing the same thing with upfront media, moving to real-time bidding, automotive, instead of buying a car, moving to on-demand transportation. And all these things, what they have in common is that the initial purchase where sales and marketing focus on, it's good, it's important, but it's just the beginning. The large majority of the value is through that customer lifetime value that Lincoln talked about before. And that's it could be 10 to 1 almost, or sometimes even more than that, in terms of how much was the initial purchase versus how much we expect to make or generate from the same customer over time. And that's where the customer health and customer success comes in. And we're not going to touch all of them, but there's multiple things that you all should be thinking about in terms of what is customer success? How do you get customers to adopt? What data do you need? You need web analytics data, sensor, log data, looking at social media for expansion, customer feedback, NPS surveys, contract data. When is the customer up for renewal? What's the billing? What's the financial data? There's multiple things that today are mostly siloed that you should be looking at in order to provide kind of that customer health and be able to ensure that the customers are succeeding in using the product, hence most of the time renewing and hopefully expanding their usage over time. And that's kind of the role of the Chief Customer Officer or the customer success in between the VP sales and the VP support. So it's not a glorified way of looking at support or anything like it, which in Israel, unfortunately, we see more people kind of treating support as success instead of realizing that this is a whole new function. And this is just, if you look at Google Trends, customer success, obviously it's a new movement. When we invested in Gainsight 2012, 2013, that was kind of still new. And there's no, I don't see any of our companies now, especially in the subscription space, that don't have or don't want to have at least a customer success manager summoning that, that discussion. And what's the reason for the importance? This is, I'm taking more of my investor hat in terms of customer success and how is it important to the company. And it's one of the key valuation drivers. So if we take a look, for example, here's an example company that has now in 2019, $200 million revenue, net retention of 110% year over year. If you take it today's revenue multiples in the public market, company like that would be worth around $2 billion. Now let's take the same company and just increase by the net retention to 125%. So it's just another 1% in net retention. What you see here, if you run the math over time, you see that the same company is going to be worth $3.5 billion at 2019, at this year. So it's an increase in value of $1.5 billion. This is almost doubling the value, the enterprise value of a company, just by increasing the net retention. And if we look at the same company, but we now, let's say, we reduced the net retention to 100%, which is still a good number for most companies, they'll buy it. What we see is the enterprise value shrinking to 1.4 billion. So shrinking by 30% just by that 10% reduction in customer success. And hence the importance of customer success. And one of the things we look at as investors is the customer success or the retention value. And you can look at public markets, not even private markets. And this is basically the correlation between some of the BVP cloud index, or we have a cloud index which takes public companies, and you look at the enterprise value to revenue. So this is the multiple that they get. This is the retention that these companies report to Wall Street. And you see a very, very strong correlation between the retention rate and the valuation that these companies get by the public market. So what is good retention? There's no one single number, and many companies have different numbers. We like much more today the kind of the model of land and expand. When you start earlier, start with small teams buying the product, and then you grow over time. But what we see here, it depends on the customer base. So if you're selling to mid-market today, let's say an average ACV of 12 to 15K, what you'd want to have or what you want to reach is more than 100% net retention. So closer to 120% would be great. That would be best in class for that customer segment. If you're selling to enterprise customers, typically the ACV would be higher, the sales cycles would be longer, and therefore you want to have net retention, which is stronger. So if you're selling to enterprise customers and you see less than 100% net retention, that's a very bad sign. It has to be north of that, because enterprise customers, it takes them a long time to adopt, but also they tend to stick for longer. And if you're selling smaller ACVs, selling SMB products or consumer products, lower than 12K, you just can't expect to have the same net retention as the enterprise or mid-market, because your customers churn. These SMB, they close shop often. They switch faster to new products. So a net retention of 80 to 100% is where you should aim. 90% would be kind of best in class. Now let's switch to building a world-class customer support management organization. And here the important thing to note, and just a kind of a show of hands, how many of you are VP customer success or kind of the management layer of the customer success? How many of you attend board meetings? I'd say probably a quarter of what I saw. And that's an important thing. So the customer success management, and Lincoln touched it before, it's important and you have a lot to do in terms of kind of evolving it and making sure that everybody understands the value. But it's not just you, it's the CEO, and it's not just the CEO, it's the board. And today, when you look at subscription companies and the importance of that net negative churn and that growth and that expansion and the customer health, like this has to be a board discussions. And what I have here is a few templates from some of the boards that I sit on that these are sanitized, so you don't see the numbers here. But what you see is like this company, where they report as the first scoreboard for the company, that's kind of the first slide in the board deck, starts with sales and marketing. But then the second thing is customer success. And you talk about the gross and net retention rate and about customers, etc. And this should be a board meeting discussion and not something that just discussed in terms of kind of the lower levels or just supporting the customers. These are some other ones. Churn analysis. You see the companies kind of segmenting their customer base into different segments because you can't expect to have the same churn, and talking about what they expect to have. Customer health, again going green and yellow and red, talking about the ones that are likely to churn, not just after they churned, and what we're doing about them. Same thing with the yellow, the green. We typically don't talk about all of them because these are kind of the okay ones. But this should be in board meeting discussions. And I really encourage you to, if you're not attending the boards, to talk to your CEO. Make sure that even if it's not every board, that you're part of that discussion, or at least you're contributing to the board level discussion. Because if the board doesn't understand the importance of customer success, then your CEO will probably care less about it, and that's going to make your job more difficult. So I want to talk about 5 best practices for customer success. And how long do I have? Okay, great. So 7 minutes. Okay. So these are some of the things that we see, A, from Gainsight, from our company, and touches many of the customer success managers across the globe. B, just from our experience within the customer success. And here it's important to know that, again, customer success is one of the most critical roles for successful company. Customer success means that the company success, and it's more important as the company evolves. So when the company is kind of the first stages, they're trying to determine the product market fit, or when they're acquiring their first customers, or when they're probably below, I'd say, $5 million ARR, then the most important thing would be the technology, the product market fit, and building that kind of go-to-market machine, and winning more deals and getting more customers to use the product. But from then on, the company kind of matures to the next stage where the customer success management becomes, I wouldn't say the most critical role, but one of the 2 or 3 most critical roles within a company in order to kind of ensure that you keep sustaining and making sure that your customers are using your products, they're growing, they're advocating, they're helping you acquire new customers, which makes the company much more healthy. So what are the best practices for customer success? The first thing is that CS and PM, product management, they're kind of the new sales and marketing. So we see sales and marketing working very closely together. Sales kind of helping marketing determine where to go and market, how to qualify a lead, what's a sales qualified lead, kind of going back and forth. What we see less, and it's not less important, is product and customer success working together too. So product deciding what product features do they want to prioritize, how do they drive the roadmap, and then once they've developed a new product or a new feature, how do they get customers to adopt it and use it and leverage it and get kind of the feedback? And that's where product management and customer success should be working very, very closely together. And oftentimes it's not the case, especially with Israeli companies, when many times you see product management here, sitting in Israel, customer success sometimes sitting in the US, and that kind of bridge makes it more difficult, and that's really important for successful companies. The second thing is to track verified outcomes, and this is where customer success becomes less of a fluff and more of a numbers-driven organization. And you want to define what are the verified outcomes from your product. So if you're selling a marketing solution, you want to make sure, like, what's the verified outcomes that if my customers are using my product, my marketing solution, or my marketing software, like, how do they get better, and how do I quantify it? And then you want to make sure that you're tracking it, and you're talking to your customers, and you're getting, no, not just like, yeah, your product is great, yeah, I love it, yeah, we all use it, but getting numbers. And then when you know these numbers, A, it helps you build more product marketing material and sell better. B, it helps you kind of understand what is exactly that you're selling and how you're driving value. And C, it helps you communicate to your CEO, to your board, what exactly, how you're contributing to the company. And getting these numbers, quantitative numbers, so customer success stops being kind of like fluff, and many people, you talk to them outside of customer success, they'll think about customer success as kind of a, yeah, like it's, you know, they're like nice people, they talk to their customers and make sure that everybody's happy and kumbaya. Like, no, you want to drive numbers, you want to drive results, and you want to make sure that you're driving these results. In a tech touch strategy, it's the same thing. What we see is in marketing departments, like everything is methodological. You're not going to go see today into a marketing department of any large company and they're going to be like writing emails or just like trying things. Like, you're going to have touch points for marketing that they know exactly, yeah, we target account-based marketing, we target this person, and then 5 days later we touch this person, and then we measure their interaction and we decide whether to go with this campaign and that campaign. Your customer success should be the same thing. Like, you should know and have a tech touch strategy of, once the customer is onboarded, and it could be by segment, it could be many of these things probably, the more granular the better. When do you touch them? How do you touch them? When do you send the survey, NPS survey? What other touch points do you want to have? How do you track their usage? Like, this has to be kind of in numbers, and you have to know exactly what you're doing and what's your strategy there. So not just kind of, whenever a customer reaches out, then you talk to them. The third thing, or the fourth thing, is how do you forecast renewals? And that's taking, again, customer success from something that's helping customers and lifting them to the same level of sales. So if the two growth drivers for companies today is new ARR and then the expansion ARR, the VP sales, he's in charge or she's in charge of the new ARR. And the board and the CEO is hammering them, how much are you going to bring next quarter? What's going to be the target for next year? And then we go to the customer success side of the house, and oftentimes you ask, like, what's going to be my renewal 4 quarters down the road? And you get that kind of a weird look. Like, you have to know exactly, not just wait for the end of the contract to figure out whether someone is going to renew or not. And it's not easy, but you want to be able to forecast growth. You want to be able to forecast renewals, and not just based on historical data, because especially in startup companies, these things change so quickly, and it's important for you to own that number and be on the hook for that number and drive your team towards that number. And then the fifth thing here is just becoming a great executive. And that goes back to most, and unfortunately, many CEOs, especially in Israeli companies, that think about the VP sales as an executive, the VP marketing would be often an executive. The VP customer success would not always be an executive. They're not going to be in the board meetings. They're not only always going to be part of that kind of same discussion. And part of it is the CEO, and part of it is you. Because the difference between a great executive and just someone who's doing their role really good is that they're thinking about kind of the broader company. It's not just their own organization, but marketing, working with sales, working with product. You should be doing the same. You should be looking at other executive roles within the company, and you should be involved, obviously in a good way, but helping them become better, helping the product management build better products, helping sales kind of target the right customer base, helping marketing. So all these things with product marketing material and great examples from your customers. So, and that's kind of the difference between, I'd say, support or a customer success manager. They're kind of doing their own job, but maybe okay, and an executive. Okay, just in time. We have 5 seconds, so we're not going to have time for Q&A, but I'm going to be around in lunch if people have questions.